She met him on a night that didn't feel like a night. The air was too still, the lights too low, as if the city itself had exhaled. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. Not from arrogance, but from absence, he looked at her the way silence looks at noise, unimpressed, unmoved, curious only to see if it would quiet down. She tried the usual spells, laughter, mystery, small tests disguised as charm. He didn't bite, he didn't chase, he didn't even flinch when she turned her back mid-sentence. He simply looked through her shadow as if it were a page he'd already read. That was the first time she felt it. Respect. It arrived disguised as confusion. Why didn't he want to be wanted? She tried harder. A different perfume. A deeper dress, a slower tone. Still, nothing. He spoke like someone who had already survived the illusion of approval. He listened, but he never leaned in. Every word he said landed like a mirror. It showed her not what she wanted to be, but who she was when no one was watching. She felt exposed, not undressed, but seen. It was maddening. Men always reached for her. This one didn't even reach for the idea of her. At dinner, she placed her hand on his. It was subtle, deliberate, like a challenge wrapped in affection. He didn't move it away. He didn't hold it either. He just let it rest there until she withdrew, embarrassed by the weight of her own performance. He smiled then. It wasn't to mock, but to remind. Real intimacy doesn't begin with touch, it begins with truth. Later that night, she screamed in her apartment. Not from anger, but from the strange ache of not being able to win. Her reflection in the window looked foreign. For the first time, she realized how much of her life had been spent rehearsing control. Days passed, she texted, he replied late, she called. He returned at once, briefly. There was no malice, no game. Just a distance so pure, it felt like discipline. In that space between her expectation and his silence, something began to change. She started thinking before speaking, feeling before reacting. She began to mirror his restraint, not because he demanded it, but because his calmness made her chaos feel childish. He never corrected her, never punished, never praised, he simply was. A still lake that refused to ripple, no matter how many stones she threw. Weeks later, they met again. She looked at him differently now. Not as a puzzle to be solved, but as proof that power doesn't always roar. Over coffee, she said, "You never try to control me." He replied, "I don't even try to control myself. I just choose what deserves my energy." She smiled. It was half surrender, half awe. It wasn't his dominance that had disarmed her, it was his detachment. She realized that control had always been her language of fear. If she could control a man, she could predict him. And if she could predict him, she could never be abandoned. But this man, he couldn't be predicted. He was ungoverned by desire, and that made him dangerous. Not because he wanted power, but because he didn't need it. The next time she saw him, she didn't flirt. She asked questions that mattered. He answered slowly, his eyes steady, his voice quiet, but unshakable. For the first time in years, she listened without trying to bend the outcome. Respect had replaced manipulation. It was no longer about winning. It was about witnessing. She finally understood. Women respect the men they can control, because such men remind them of everything they could be, centered, whole, untouched by the need for validation. Control is born from insecurity. Respect is born from surrender. Months later, he disappeared. No goodbye, no closure, just absence. She waited. She replayed every word, every silence, searching for the moment she lost him. But he was never hers to lose. He existed like a law of nature. The sun doesn't apologize for setting. The tide doesn't explain why it recedes. In his absence, she became what he had been. Grounded, still, complete. He hadn't rejected her. He had reflected her potential back to her, and she rose into it. One evening, she saw him again, across a crowded room. Their eyes met. In that instant, no words were needed. He nodded once, not a greeting, but a recognition. She nodded back. To sovereigns acknowledging the end of an illusion, she didn't chase, he didn't stay. Between them hung a silence thick with everything that had been taught without being spoken. The woman who can control the man learns to master herself. And the man who doesn't need control earns her eternal respect. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content that explores the depths of the human psyche. We'll see you in the next one.